All right, today we are going to dive into one of the most dramatic, tragic, and honestly, revolutionary stories in all of music. We're talking about a band that didn't just break the rules of the Japanese music industry, they completely rewrote them. This is the story of X Japan.
So, picture this. It's the 1980s, and Japanese pop culture is pretty conservative, pretty clean-cut. And then, these guys show up. With the crazy hair, the androgynous makeup, the super flamboyant outfits, the critics just didn't get it. They laughed them off. To the establishment, it was just a joke, a cosplay party. But what they didn't realize was that a full-blown revolution was about to begin. And what did that revolution look like? Well, it looked a little something like this. That so-called costume party ended up selling over 30 million records. Let that sink in. 30 million. They became one of the most successful and influential rock bands in the history of Japan.
And this quote from the band's founder and mastermind, Yoshiki, it says it all, doesn't it? He knew what he was doing. It was almost like the more the critics hated on them, the more the fans rallied behind them. And you know what? He just leaned right into it.
See, they didn't just play music. They created an entire cultural movement. It's called Visual Kei. And it wasn't just about the look. It was about this total artistic vision that smashed together aggressive speed metal with these beautiful, soaring classical piano pieces and epic ballads. The sound was just as unique as their style. X Japan basically wrote the blueprint for it, inspiring thousands of bands for decades.
So how did a revolution like this even get started? Well, for that, we got to go back to the beginning, back to a couple of high school kids with a crazy idea.
And their rise was just breathtakingly fast. They were formed back in '82 by these two childhood friends, Yoshiki and Toshi. And once they got their lineup locked in, they just exploded. They put out their first album on their own label, and just a year later, Sony scooped them up and they skyrocketed to superstardom.
And you gotta understand, this right here, this was a seismic shift. Before X Japan, the music industry had these giant gates, and you needed a major label to even get a peek inside. X didn't just find a way in, they blew the gates right off their hinges, proving you could hit the big time completely on your own terms.
So, with the rulebook torn to shreds, what was left to do? Take over the entire country, of course. This is the part of the story where X went from being rock stars to a full-blown national phenomenon. We're talking about a level of fandom called X-mania. They didn't just play at the legendary Tokyo Dome, they made it their house, starting a tradition of completely sold-out New Year's Eve shows. They started racking up industry awards, from the same industry that once laughed at them. Their fame got so big they actually had to add Japan to their name, because their sights were set on the whole world. And if you need one story to understand how huge they were, here it is. This is not just celebrity popularity. This is Beatlemania-level hysteria. When you need the actual military to handle crowd control for you at the airport, well, you're not just a band anymore. You're a cultural event.
At this point, they were on top of the world. They seemed unstoppable, unbreakable. But the same fire that got them to the top was starting to cause some serious cracks right below the surface, and nobody saw it coming. Right at their absolute peak, the story takes a devastatingly dark turn.
It all started here. In 1997, out of nowhere, Toshi, the voice of the band, announced he was quitting. The official story was that he was just burned out, that the rock star life wasn't for him. And just like that, X Japan was over. They disbanded.
But the truth? The truth was a complete nightmare, and it wouldn't come out for more than a decade. Toshi later revealed he'd been systematically manipulated and brainwashed by a cult. They controlled his entire life, they took all his money. The band didn't just break up. Their singer was literally stolen from them.
And just when you think it can't possibly get any worse, it does. Only 5 months after the band's final concert, their iconic lead guitarist, Heath, a creative genius and a fashion icon, was found dead. His loss sent a shockwave across the entire nation.
And here's the part that's just absolutely heartbreaking. The story wasn't supposed to end that way. Turns out, Heath and Yoshiki were already planning to bring X Japan back for a reunion in the year 2000. So his death wasn't just the loss of an incredible artist, it was the loss of a future that was this close to happening.
So for 10 years, that was it. An ending steeped in tragedy and silence. But the symphony of X Japan, believe it or not, wasn't quite finished. After a decade, one of music's most unbelievable comebacks was about to happen.
In 2007, after a full decade and after Toshi had finally escaped the clutches of the cult, X-Japan returned. And they made one thing very clear. They never left Heath behind. To this day, he is an official member of the band. His image is often on stage with them, and his guitar tracks are even used in new songs.
And this time, they weren't just focused on Japan. They were going for the whole world. That global push that got cut short in the 90s was back on. They played huge festivals, toured North America and Europe, and eventually had a massive headlining show at the legendary Madison Square Garden in New York.
So that brings us pretty much to the present. The band is back, they've taken on the world, but their story, in so many ways, still feels unfinished.
And this is the great mystery that hangs over everything. You see, a new album, their first in over 20 years, has supposedly been in the works since they got back together. Fans have been waiting for more than a decade.
And here's the crazy part. Yoshiki himself said the album was done years ago, but for whatever reason, it's still locked away in a vault somewhere, completely unheard. It's become the final, phantom chapter of their story.
And then, tragically, the band's story was marked by loss yet again. In late 2023, their longtime bassist Heath, who'd been with them since 1992, passed away after a quiet battle with cancer. It was just another devastating blow for a group of people who have already endured so much.
So, in the end, what is the legacy of X-Japan? I mean, they're the rebels who ended up becoming royalty. They're the band that went through breakups, brainwashing, and unbelievable loss, and yet, somehow, refused to be silenced. It's one of the most dramatic stories in music history, and with that final album still waiting in the wings, their unfinished symphony just continues to echo.